The rain didn't fall on Pier 19, it declared war. Each drop hit the concrete like a bullet, turning the New Jersey docks into a battlefield of mist and shadows. Tabitha Obery stood at the edge of the loading bay, her 6-foot frame silhouetted against the floodlights, a steel crowbar gripped in her calloused hands. 3 years ago, her name had been chanted in Olympic stadiums. Tonight, Foreman Miller wouldn't even use it. Number 42. His voice cut through the downpour as he kicked over her water bucket, scattering her tools across the wet deck. You call this clean? My grandmother scrubs better than you, and she's been dead 10 years. Tabitha's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Her dark brown skin glistened with rain and sweat, her box braids pulled back tight, revealing the sharp angles of a face that had once graced magazine covers. Now, she was invisible. A ghost in a fluorescent vest. The doping scandal orchestrated by people whose faces she still saw in her nightmares had stripped her of everything. Her medals, her endorsements, her name. The world had called her a cheater, and when she'd screamed the truth, they'd called her a liar, so she'd stopped screaming. She'd learned to disappear. Miller spat near her boot and walked away, his flashlight beam slicing through the rain like a judgment. The sound of his footsteps faded into the rhythmic hammer of the storm. Tabitha knelt, gathering her scattered tools with mechanical precision, her fingers numb from the cold. Welcome to Ruthless Romance Tales. And honey, you just stepped into something you can't unsee. If you've been riding with me, you know we don't do safe here, we do dangerous, we do addictive, we do the kind of love that brands your soul and refuses to let go. And if you're new, buckle the hell up, because what you're about to witness is a collision so violent, so inevitable, it'll rewrite everything you thought you knew about romance. Hit that like button like your life depends on it, subscribe because you're already hooked, and smash that notification bell, because missing what comes next would be a crime. Now let's watch how the Mafia boss's life changed forever. What Miller didn't know, what he couldn't see through the sheets of rain hammering the pier, was that in exactly 47 seconds, everything would change. High above, on the elevated highway that cut across the waterfront, a reinforced black luxury vehicle was hydroplaning at 70 miles per hour. The driver, Wang Yan, known in certain circles as the Dragon of the Goryeo Syndicate, a man whose whispered name made politicians sweat and rival gangs relocate, was fighting a losing battle with physics. His brake lines had been cut, not by enemies across the ocean, but by blood. His own brother, eager to sell the family's empire to the highest bidder, had made sure this rain-soaked November night would be Yeon's last. The car hit a patch of standing water. For one suspended moment, Wang Yun, 220 pounds of controlled violence wrapped in a tailored black suit, felt weightlessness. Then the vehicle punched through the guardrail like it was made of cardboard. Tabitha looked up just as metal shrieked against metal. The barrier exploded into twisted fragments. The car seemed to hang in the air, suspended between gravity and inevitability, its headlights cutting white lines through the darkness. Rain exploded around it like shattered glass. Then it dropped. The impact sent a shockwave across the water. The vehicle hit nose first, the sound like a cannon blast swallowed by the river's throat. Waves surged outward in violent rings. Foam and debris shot 15 feet into the air. Within seconds, the car was sinking, pulled down by the weight of its armored plating, the very thing designed to keep Wang Yun safe, now dragging him to his grave. Tabitha stood frozen, her heart a war drum in her chest. 2 silver SUVs screeched to a halt where the guardrail used to be. Men emerged, their faces obscured by the rain and distance, watching the bubbling water with the stillness of executioners confirming a kill. They didn't move to help. They didn't call for rescue. They simply waited for the river to finish what they'd started. Then they turned and left. The pier fell silent except for the rain. Tabitha's hand moved to her chest, fingers finding the thin chain beneath her soaked shirt. Her Olympic ring hung there, tarnished, worthless to anyone but her. The last physical proof that she'd once been someone who mattered. Her breath came in shallow bursts. She should walk away. She was nobody. A ghost. A woman the world had already thrown away. But 20 feet below the surface, a man was drowning. And Tabitha Obery had stopped believing in the rules a long time ago. She dropped the crowbar, kicked off her steel-toed boots, and ran toward the edge of the pier. Her body remembered what her mind had tried to forget: the angle of entry, the breath control, the way water could be both salvation and executioner. At the edge, she didn't hesitate. She didn't pray. She simply dove into the freezing black abyss, disappearing beneath the surface like she'd never existed at all. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know as the river swallowed her whole, was that the man sinking in that car had spent 3 years searching for the people who destroyed her career. that his brother's betrayal and her public execution were two threads of the same poisoned web. That saving his life tonight would set off a chain reaction neither of them could control. Because some rescues aren't just about pulling someone from the water, some rescues drown you both. The cold didn't just touch Tabitha, it invaded. 38 degrees of liquid darkness wrapped around her like a fist, squeezing the air from her lungs before she'd even reached the car. But her body knew this language. 3 years of scrubbing ship hulls in winter waters had taught her muscles to move through cold that would paralyze most people within seconds. She descended through the black, following the fading glow of the vehicle's taillights. The pressure built in her ears, in her chest, a familiar ache that reminded her of Olympic training pools at dawn. Except there were no lanes here, no cheering crowds, just the muffled silence of water and the countdown of her own oxygen. 15 feet down, she saw him. Wang Yon was pressed against the driver's window, his face a pale shadow behind the glass. His eyes were closed, his body slack, blood curled from a gash on his temple, spreading through the water like ink. The car had landed at an angle, nose down, the reinforced doors sealed tight by water pressure, and engineering designed to withstand bullets, not drowning. Tabitha's lungs began to burn. She'd been under for 40 seconds. She had maybe 90 more before her body would start shutting down, prioritizing her brain over her limbs. She grabbed the door handle and pulled. Nothing. The pressure was too great. The lock still engaged. Her pulse thundered in her temples. She kicked down to the door's lower edge, wedging her fingers into the seal where metal met rubber. The crowbar was gone, left on the pier in her sprint to the water. All she had were her hands and the physics she'd learned working the docks. She planted her feet against the car's frame and pulled with everything she had, shoulders that had propelled her through water faster than any woman in Olympic history, core muscles that had held her body parallel to the surface for 400 meters without faltering. The seal groaned, the rubber tore slightly. Not enough. Her vision started to tunnel. 70 seconds underwater. Her body screamed for air, but Tabitha had spent her entire athletic career learning to ignore her body's screams. She repositioned, found a better angle, and pulled again. This time, something gave. The door shifted an inch. Water rushed into the gap, equalizing the pressure. She yanked harder. The door flew open with sudden violence, and the force sent her tumbling backward through the water. She righted herself, fighting against the current of air bubbles escaping the vehicle's interior. Wang Yon's body began to drift forward, pulled by the water pouring into the car. Tabitha grabbed him. Her arms wrapped around his chest from behind, locking beneath his arms. 220 pounds of dead weight. In training, they'd taught her to never attempt a rescue like this, you'd drown with them. But training had been designed for people who played by the rules. She kicked upward. Her legs burned. Her lungs felt like they were filled with fire instead of air. The surface was impossibly far, a faint shimmer of lighter black against absolute darkness. Yon's body was an anchor, pulling her down even as she fought upward. The chain around her neck caught on something, his collar. A button, she felt it snap. Felt her ring slip away into the depths. No time to care. No air to waste on regret. Her head broke the surface behind a cluster of barnacle-covered pylons, hidden from the pier. She gasped, dragging in air that tasted like diesel and rain. Yon's head lolled against her shoulder, still unconscious. She pulled him onto a narrow maintenance ledge, a rusted platform she'd used countless times during hull inspections. She laid him flat and pressed her palms to his chest. 30 compressions. Fast and hard, the way she'd been taught. His ribs flexed beneath her hands. She tilted his head back, pinched his nose, and breathed into his mouth. Once, twice, nothing. Again. 30 compressions, 2 breaths. His body convulsed. River water erupted from his mouth, and he rolled onto his side, choking and gasping. His eyes flew open, dark, fierce, utterly disoriented. They locked onto hers. For 3 seconds, neither of them moved. Rain hammered the ledge around them. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Then his hand shot out and gripped her wrist with startling strength. "Who are you?" His voice was raw gravel, his accent sharp. Tabitha pulled free and stood. Water streamed from her clothes, from her hair. Someone who just made a mistake. She dove back into the river before he could respond, disappearing into the maze of support beams and shadows beneath the pier. By the time the police boats arrived with their searchlights cutting through the rain, the ledge was empty, except for an unconscious Korean man in a destroyed suit and the distant echo of sirens. Wang Yon pressed his hand to his chest, still gasping, and felt something tangled in the torn fabric of his shirt. He pulled it free. A thin gold ring on a broken chain, the metal tarnished but unmistakable. Engraved on the inside, Tokyo 2021. 400 meters freestyle, T. Obery. Wang Yon woke to the smell of antiseptic and the soft beep of monitors. The private medical facility was silent, except for the rain still drumming against floor-to-ceiling windows. His body ached in places he didn't know could ache, but his mind was sharp, cutting through the fog of painkillers with the precision of a man who'd learned early that vulnerability was a death sentence. He sat up slowly, ignoring the pull of stitches across his ribs. The room was dimmed, all dark wood and leather chairs, comfort designed to make powerful men feel less like patients. His suit, what remained of it, hung in a clear evidence bag on the wall. Ruined, $30,000 reduced to shredded fabric and river stains, but in his hand, cleaned and gleaming under the low light, was the ring. He turned it slowly, reading the inscription for the 100th time. Tokyo 2021. He'd been in Tokyo that summer, conducting business while the world watched the Olympics. He remembered the scandal that had erupted during the swimming events. A young American swimmer, accused of doping. The press had been vicious. The defense had been loud but ultimately silenced. He hadn't paid much attention then. He had ports to secure, politicians to buy, empires to maintain. Now, he pulled up the archived news footage on his phone, the screen filled with images of her, Tabitha Obery, 24 years old at the time, standing before a panel of officials, her face a mask of controlled fury. 6 feet tall, shoulders built for power, her voice steady even as they stripped her titles away. The comments section had been brutal, the kind of brutality that destroyed lives. Yon paused the video on her face. Even in her devastation, there'd been something unbreakable in her eyes, the same look she'd had on that maintenance ledge, soaking wet and fierce, before she'd vanished back into the river. She hadn't asked for payment, hadn't asked for anything. She'd saved his life and disappeared like smoke. The door opened without knocking. His brother entered, all concerned smiles and expensive casual wear. Dae-jung was younger by 3 years, handsome in the way that made people trust him too easily. He carried 2 cups of coffee, playing the role of devoted family. "You're awake." Dae-jung set 1 cup on the side table. "The doctors said you shouldn't be moving yet." "The doctors don't run my schedule." Yeon's voice was still rough from the river water. He slipped the ring into his pocket before his brother could see it. "The car? Salvaged this morning. The investigators confirmed brake line failure. Someone tampered with it." Dae-jung's performance of anger was almost believable. "I've already put our people on finding who's responsible." "And the witness?" Yeon watched his brother's face carefully. "The person who pulled me out?" Dae-jung's expression didn't change, but Yeon caught the micropause, the slight tension in his jaw. "The police found no one. You were alone when they arrived. Maybe you freed yourself before losing consciousness. The trauma can blur memories." Liar. Yeon had spent 20 years reading people, learning to spot the spaces between words where truth went to hide. His brother knew something, which meant his brother's people had been watching, which meant the brake line failure wasn't random, and the silver SUVs that had waited at the pier's edge hadn't been concerned bystanders. Perhaps. Yeon took the coffee, let the silence stretch just long enough to make Dae-jung uncomfortable. "The business with the Vanguard Group, where are we on that?" His brother's shoulders relaxed slightly, relieved by the change of subject. "The contracts are ready for your signature. They're offering premium rates for exclusive port access. It's the deal of the decade." "The Vanguard Group." Yeon repeated the name slowly, tasting it. Something about it nagged at him, a connection his mind was trying to make. He pulled up his phone again, ran a quick search. Vanguard Group international shipping conglomerate, but also heavy investors in sports management, Olympic sponsorships, anti-doping agencies, the same agency that had brought down Tabitha Obery. His fingers tightened around the phone. The pieces were starting to connect, forming a picture he didn't like. He looked at his brother, really looked at him, and saw a stranger wearing a familiar face. "I need 72 hours to review the contracts personally," Yeon said. "Don't sign anything until I clear it." Dae-jung's smile faltered for half a second. "Of course. But they're expecting an answer by 72 hours. Yeon's tone left no room for negotiation. "Now leave. I need to rest." After the door closed, Yeon pulled the ring from his pocket again. He made a call to his head of security, a former intelligence officer who could find ghosts if you paid him enough. "I need you to locate someone. Tabitha Obery, last known location, New Jersey docks. I don't care what it takes. Find her within 24 hours. He hung up and stared at the ring. She'd lost this saving his life, which meant she didn't know he had it, didn't know he was looking for her. But she would soon, because Wang Yon didn't believe in coincidences, and he sure as hell didn't believe in debts left unpaid. Tabitha's fingers were bleeding again. She'd scrubbed the same section of hull 3 times, but Foreman Miller kept finding reasons to make her redo it. The rain had stopped sometime before dawn, leaving the docks wrapped in a thick fog that turned the shipping containers into gray ghosts. She didn't mind the repetition. The work kept her hands busy and her mind from drifting back to the river, to the weight of a drowning man in her arms, to the moment his eyes had opened and locked onto hers with an intensity that had made her feel seen for the first time in 3 years. She'd left her ring behind. The only thing her mother had given her before cancer had taken her voice, then her breath, then everything else. The ring that had hung around Tabitha's neck through every race, every victory, every moment of her old life. Gone now. Somewhere at the bottom of the Hudson, mixed with silt and forgotten things. Number 42. Miller's voice cut through the fog. You got a visitor. Tabitha looked up, squinting through the mist. A black SUV sat at the dock's entrance, silent and sleek. Not the silver ones from that night, she'd memorized those in the split second before diving, but the kind of vehicle that didn't belong in a place where people worked with their hands. A man emerged from the driver's side. Not young, not old, military bearing, eyes that cataloged everything. He walked toward her with the purposeful stride of someone who didn't waste time on pleasantries. Tabitha Obery? She wiped her hands on her coveralls, leaving rust-colored streaks. Depends on who's asking. My employer would like to speak with you. He held out a business card. Plain white, embossed with a single phone number. No name, no company. Today. Now, if possible. I'm working. He's willing to compensate you for your time. $5,000 for 1 hour of conversation. The number hung in the air between them like a hallucination. Tabitha made $8 an hour scrubbing hulls. $5,000 was more than she'd see in 2 months, even working double shifts. Enough to fix the heat in her apartment before winter truly set in. Enough to stop choosing between electricity and food. What does he want to talk about? That's between you and him. The man's expression didn't change, but I can tell you he's not law enforcement, he's not immigration, and he's not a journalist. Whatever happened 3 nights ago stays private. 3 nights ago. So this was about the river. About the man she'd pulled from the water. Every instinct Tabitha had developed in 3 years of surviving on the margins screamed at her to walk away. People with this kind of money, this kind of discretion, were dangerous. They wanted things, and when they couldn't buy what they wanted, they took it anyway. But $5,000. 1 hour, she said. Public place. Already arranged. He gestured toward the SUV. There's a change of clothes in the back. My employer thought you might prefer not to arrive in work gear. Tabitha almost laughed, as if clean clothes could disguise what she was. But she followed him to the vehicle, climbed into the back seat, and found a garment bag waiting. Inside was a simple outfit, dark jeans, a white shirt, a leather jacket. Not fancy, but new. The kind of new she hadn't worn in years. The tags were still attached. Size 8, exactly her size. Her skin prickled. Whoever this employer was, he'd done his research, knew her measurements, knew where she worked, knew she'd been at the pier that night. Despite the darkness and the rain and her disappearing act into the support beams, she should tell the driver to stop, should get out and run. Instead, she changed clothes in the back seat while the SUV pulled away from the docks. The jeans fit perfectly. The shirt was soft against her skin, unmarred by chemical burns or permanent stains. The jacket smelled like leather and possibility. They drove for 40 minutes, leaving the industrial waterfront behind. The city gave way to suburbs, then to estates hidden behind stone walls and iron gates. The SUV turned into a private drive lined with trees still clinging to their autumn leaves. At the end of the drive sat a house that made Tabitha's breath catch. Not a house, an estate. All glass and steel and understated wealth, the kind that didn't need to announce itself because everyone already knew. The SUV stopped at the entrance. The driver opened her door. He's waiting in the study. Straight through the foyer, second door on the left. Tabitha stepped out onto gravel that crunched like broken promises beneath her feet. The front door was already open. Inside, she could see gleaming hardwood floors and art that probably cost more than most people's houses. She walked forward because turning back now would mean admitting she was afraid, and Tabitha Obery had stopped admitting weakness the day the world called her a cheater and refused to hear her truth. The study was all dark wood and leather-bound books, the kind of room designed to make visitors feel small. But Tabitha had learned long ago that physical space was just another arena, and she'd spent her life refusing to shrink for anyone's comfort. Wang Yun stood by the window, his back to her. Even in stillness, he commanded the room. Charcoal suit, perfectly tailored, dark hair swept back. The bandage on his temple was the only evidence of the river, a small white square against his skin. Miss Obery, He turned, and the movement was controlled, deliberate. "Thank you for coming." His voice was different from that night, no longer the raw gravel of a drowning man, but smooth, cultured, dangerous in its politeness. He was younger than she'd realized, maybe 35, with features that would have been beautiful if they weren't so carefully neutral. "You paid for an hour." Tabitha stayed near the door, maintaining her exit route. "The clock's running." A slight smile touched his mouth, there and gone. "Direct. I appreciate that." He moved to the desk, picked up something small. "I believe this belongs to you." Her ring. The breath left Tabitha's lungs. He'd cleaned it, polished it until the gold shone like it had the day her mother had pressed it into her palm. The chain was new, delicate white gold, nothing like the cheap replacement she'd bought after losing the original. "I looked you up," Yeon continued, setting the ring on the desk between them. "Tabitha Obery, Olympic gold medalist, 2021 Tokyo Games, 400-meter freestyle. American record holder. Then the doping scandal. WADA found traces of a banned substance in your system after the finals. You maintained your innocence. The appeals process took 8 months. Every single one denied. Is there a question in there? Or are you just reciting my Wikipedia page?" "The question is why?" He leaned against the desk, eyes fixed on her face. "Why a woman who lost everything would risk her life to save a stranger? Maybe I'm just stupid." "You're many things, Miss Obery. Stupid isn't one of them." He paused. "You were training for the 2024 Paris Games when the ban came down. Lifetime suspension. Career over at 24. The coaching staff abandoned you. Sponsors sued for breach of contract. Your apartment was vandalized. Someone spray-painted cheater across your door 3 times before you finally moved." Tabitha's jaw tightened. "You've been busy. I needed to understand who you were, what you wanted." Yeon's gaze didn't waver. Most people who save a life expect something in return. Gratitude, money, favors. You asked for nothing. You didn't even stay long enough to be thanked. That kind of behavior suggests either extraordinary altruism or someone running from something. Maybe it's both. Maybe. He picked up a folder from the desk, held it without opening. "Tell me something, Miss Obery. Do you know who the Vanguard Group is?" The name sent ice through her veins. She'd spent 3 years trying to forget that name, to scrub it from her memory the way she scrubbed rust from ship hulls. The Vanguard Group, the international conglomerate that had funded the investigation into her supposed doping, the same company whose representatives had sat in the hearing room with satisfied smiles while her life was dismantled piece by piece. "I know them." Her voice came out flat, emotionless. "Then you know they're expanding into port operations. They've made my organization a very generous offer for exclusive access to our New Jersey terminals." He opened the folder. "What you don't know is that my brother is negotiating the deal without my authorization. What you also don't know is that 3 nights ago, someone cut my brake lines. The same night I was scheduled to reject Vanguard's proposal." Tabitha's mind raced, connecting dots she didn't want to see. "Your own brother tried to kill you. Family is complicated." His tone suggested this was an understatement. But here's what made me curious. When I started investigating Vanguard's business practices, I found something interesting. Their sports management division has a specific pattern. They identify promising athletes, invest heavily in their careers, then profit from their success. But sometimes, when an athlete becomes too independent, too difficult to control, they orchestrate scandals. Doping accusations are particularly effective, hard to disprove, easy to fabricate. He pulled a photograph from the folder, slid it across the desk. Tabitha's hands shook as she picked it up. The image showed 2 men shaking hands at what looked like a corporate event, one she didn't recognize. The other made her stomach twist. Dr. Marcus Webb, her former team physician, the man who'd administered her vitamin injections the week before the Olympics, the man who'd sworn under oath he'd never given her anything banned, the man who'd disappeared 6 months after her hearing, leaving no forwarding address. "This was taken in Seoul last year," Yeon said quietly. "Dr. Webb now works exclusively for Vanguard. Very well compensated, I'm told. Private jet, offshore accounts, the works." The room tilted. Tabitha gripped the edge of the desk, her athletic training the only thing keeping her upright. 3 years. 3 years of believing she'd somehow contaminated her own samples, of questioning every meal, every supplement, every moment of those final weeks. 3 years of carrying the shame of a crime she didn't commit. And it had been deliberate, calculated. Someone had injected her with banned substances and then watched her burn. "Why are you telling me this?" Her voice barely rose above a whisper. Wang Yun's expression shifted, something almost like respect flickering in his eyes. Because the people who tried to kill me are the same people who destroyed you. Because my brother is in bed with an organization that specializes in ruining lives for profit. And because, he pushed the ring toward her, you saved my life without knowing any of this. Which means you're either the most unlucky woman in New Jersey, or fate has a twisted sense of humor. Tabitha stared at the ring, her mother's last gift, then looked up at him. What do you want from me? I want to offer you a choice. He straightened, and suddenly the polite facade dropped, revealing something harder beneath. Something that matched the intensity she'd seen in his eyes on that maintenance ledge. Walk away right now with $50,000 for saving my life. Never see me again. Or, he paused, help me destroy them. All of them. Your doctor, my brother, Vanguard. Everyone who thought they could rewrite our lives without consequences. Tabitha's fingers hovered over the ring, not quite touching it. $50,000. She could disappear with that kind of money. Start over somewhere the name Tabitha Obery didn't carry the stench of scandal. Somewhere she could breathe without the weight of 3 years pressing down on her chest. But disappearing wouldn't give her back what they'd taken. Wouldn't erase the spray paint. Wouldn't silence the voices that had called her a liar when she'd screamed the truth. You don't even know me, she said finally. For all you know, I actually did take those drugs. Did you? The question was simple, direct. No judgment in his tone, just curiosity. No. Then we have something in common. Yon moved to a small bar cart, poured 2 glasses of water. Not whiskey, not wine, just water. He offered her one. We're both victims of people who think power means they can rewrite reality. Tabitha took the glass but didn't drink. What exactly are you proposing? Information for information. Resources for action. He set his own glass down, untouched. I have access to financial records, surveillance capabilities, connections that can open doors you didn't know existed. What I don't have is someone who understands Vanguard's sports division from the inside. Someone who knows how they operate, who their key players are, how they select their targets. I was their target, not their partner, which makes you more valuable. You've seen their methods firsthand. You know their vulnerabilities. He pulled out another folder, thicker this time. My people have been investigating Vanguard for 2 weeks. We've found irregularities in their port acquisition strategy bribes, forged documents, shell companies, but the sports division is cleaner, almost too clean, because they don't leave paper trails. Tabitha's mind was already working, remembering. Everything happens in person. Private conversations, cash payments, doctor. Webb used to get phone calls on a second cell phone. Always stepped out of the room. The injections he gave me weren't logged in any official medical records. Exactly. Yon's eyes sharpened with interest. Which means to expose them, we need someone on the inside. Someone they won't recognize as a threat. They destroyed my career. I'm hardly invisible to them. To the sports division, yes. But to the port operations side? He opened the folder, revealing organizational charts. Vanguard keeps their divisions separate. The people negotiating with my brother have never heard of you, and they're about to become very interested in hiring new personnel for their New Jersey expansion. Tabitha's pulse quickened despite herself. You want me to infiltrate them? I want to give you the opportunity to reclaim what they took. Your reputation. Your truth. He paused. Your life. The words hung in the air like a promise and a threat. Tabitha looked at the ring again, at the inscription her mother had chosen. Not just the games and the year, but her initials. T. Obery, Tabitha Marie Obery, who'd learned to swim in a public pool because her mother couldn't afford private lessons, who'd trained before school and after school and on weekends because she'd been chasing something bigger than herself, who'd stood on that podium in Tokyo with tears streaming down her face because she'd finally proven that a girl from nowhere could become someone, and they'd taken it all away with a lie. If I do this, she said slowly, I want more than revenge. I want proof. Documented, irrefutable proof that clears my name, that gets my records reinstated, that makes them admit what they did. That's the goal. And if we fail, if they catch on? Yon's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Something that reminded her he wasn't just a victim, he was a man who'd survived in a world where failure meant death. Then we both lose everything, which is why failure isn't an option. Tabitha picked up the ring. The gold was warm in her palm, warmed by the study's heat, by proximity to something that felt dangerous and inevitable. She slipped it over her head, felt the familiar weight settle against her chest. I'll need training, not athletic training the other kind. How to gather evidence without being caught. How to lie convincingly. How to be someone I'm not. I can provide that. And I work alone. I don't want your people shadowing me, compromising the operation. Agreed. But you'll have a direct line to me. Anytime, any situation. If something goes wrong, I handle it myself. Tabitha met his gaze steadily. I've been taking care of myself for 3 years. I don't need a rescue team. A slow smile crossed Yon's face, genuine this time. You're tougher than I thought. You pulled a stranger from a freezing river. I'd say we're even on the tough scale. She drained the water glass, set it down with a soft click. When do we start? Tomorrow. My brother is hosting a reception for Vanguard's executives. You'll attend as my guest. It's time they saw what a ghost looks like when she comes back to haunt them. Tabitha's reflection stared back at her from the window glass, a woman in borrowed clothes, wearing a ring that carried the weight of everything she'd lost. But for the first time in 3 years, she didn't see a victim looking back. She saw a weapon being sharpened. One condition, she added. When this is over, when we've burned them to the ground, I walk away clean. No debts, no obligations. We're even. Yon extended his hand. Deal. His grip was firm, businesslike. But when their palms touched, Tabitha felt something electric pass between them. Not attraction, not yet. Something more complicated. Recognition, maybe. 2 people who'd been pushed underwater and refused to drown, now pulling each other toward the surface. Or toward something deeper. She left the estate with $5,000 in her pocket for the hour of conversation, a new phone with 1 programmed number, and instructions to be ready by 7 tomorrow evening. The driver took her back to the docks in silence. Miller was gone when she arrived. The evening shift already started. Tabitha climbed back into her coveralls, back to the hull she'd been scrubbing, and worked until her hands bled again. But this time, the pain felt different. This time, it felt like preparation. The dress arrived at Tabitha's apartment at noon the next day. Not delivered by a courier service, but by the same driver who'd brought her to Yon's estate. He handed her a garment bag and a small box without comment, then disappeared back down the stairwell. Inside the bag was a gown, the color of deep wine, elegant without being ostentatious, the kind of dress that whispered wealth rather than shouting it. Tabitha held it up to the light filtering through her apartment's single window. The fabric moved like water, catching the sun in subtle shifts of burgundy and black. The box contained shoes, simple heels, broken in slightly so they wouldn't hurt, and a note in sharp handwriting, "You'll need to look like you belong, but not like you're trying too hard. This should work." Why? Tabitha hung the dress on the back of her bathroom door and stared at it for a long time. 3 years ago, she'd owned a closet full of dresses like this. Designer labels sent by sponsors, gowns for award ceremonies and charity galas. She'd given them all away after the scandal, sold them to pay rent when the lawsuits started draining her savings. Now here she was again, being dressed by someone else's money for someone else's agenda. Except this time, the agenda was hers too. She spent the afternoon researching. The phone Yon had given her had access to files he'd compiled background on every Vanguard executive expected at tonight's reception. Their roles, their histories, their weaknesses. She memorized faces, names, the intricate web of who reported to whom. One name appeared more frequently than others. Victoria Lang, Senior Vice President of Strategic Acquisitions. 52 years old, Harvard MBA, 20 years with Vanguard. She'd been present at Tabitha's hearing 3 years ago, sitting in the back row with a tablet, taking notes. Tabitha remembered her because she'd been the only one smiling when the final verdict came down. The file noted that Lang had personally overseen the recruitment of Dr. Webb after the Tokyo Olympics, that she'd authorized the payment that had made him disappear, that she'd built her career on finding pressure points and exploiting them without mercy. Tabitha studied Lang's photograph until she could see it with her eyes closed, memorized the angle of her smile, the cold intelligence in her eyes. This was the woman who'd orchestrated her destruction, not for ideology, not for sport, just for profit and control. At 6:30, Tabitha showered and dressed with the mechanical precision of an athlete preparing for competition. The dress fit perfectly. Yon had gotten her measurements right down to the 1/4 inch. The shoes were comfortable, low enough to run in if necessary. She pulled her braids into an elegant updo, applied minimal makeup, and studied herself in the mirror. She looked like someone who belonged at a high society reception, polished, composed, unthreatening, perfect. The SUV arrived at 7 exactly, but this time, when the door opened, Yon himself stepped out. He wore a charcoal suit that made him look like old money and new danger combined. The bandage was gone from his temple, revealing a thin healing cut that somehow made him look more dangerous, not less. When he saw her, something flickered in his expression, surprise, quickly masked. "You look," he started, "like I belong?" Tabitha descended the stairs from her building, her spine straight. That's the point, isn't it? I was going to say formidable. Even better. She slid into the SUV before he could play gentleman and hold the door. He followed, settling into the seat across from her. As they pulled away from the curb, Jan handed her a slim portfolio. Your cover story. You're Tabitha Morris, sports consultant for international athletics programs. We met through mutual connections in the fitness industry. You're advising me on wellness initiatives for my shipping employees. Specific enough to be believable, vague enough to deflect questions. Tabitha scanned the fabricated resume. You've thought this through. I've been planning this for 2 weeks, ever since I realized my brother was going to move against me. He paused. What I didn't plan for was finding someone who had as much reason to destroy Vanguard as I do. Lucky coincidence. I don't believe in luck. I believe in leverage. His eyes met hers in the dim light of the vehicle. Tonight, you'll meet the people who ruined your life. They won't recognize you. The sports division keeps terrible photographs on file. And you've changed since Tokyo. You're harder now. Sharper. 3 years of scrubbing ship hulls will do that. 3 years of surviving what would have broken most people. He corrected. Use that anger tonight. Channel it. But don't let them see it. Can you do that? Tabitha thought about all the times she'd smiled at Foreman Miller while he degraded her. All the times she'd swallowed her rage and kept working because survival required it. All the times she'd been invisible because being seen meant being hurt. I've had a lot of practice, she said. The reception was held at a private estate in Alpine, New Jersey. The kind of place where governors and crime lords rubbed shoulders and pretended not to recognize each other. Yon's hand settled on the small of her back as they entered. The touch professional but somehow intimate, establishing their cover as associates with history. The room was full of people who'd perfected the art of smiling while calculating your net worth. Tabitha recognized several faces from her research. Junior executives, lawyers, accountants. The machinery that kept Vanguard running smoothly while people like Victoria Lang made the decisions that destroyed lives. And then she saw her. Victoria Lang stood near the bar, champagne flute in hand, deep in conversation with a silver-haired man Tabitha recognized as Dae Jung-yeon's brother. They were laughing about something. The easy laughter of conspirators who thought they'd already won. Tabitha's fingers tightened on her clutch. Every instinct screamed at her to walk over there, to grab Lang by her silk scarf and demand answers. But Yon's hand pressed slightly firmer against her back. A warning, a reminder, patience, he murmured, his lips close to her ear. Let them come to us. So Tabitha smiled and accepted a glass of sparkling water from a passing waiter. She made small talk with strangers whose names she immediately forgot. She played the role of successful consultant with practiced ease, all while tracking Lang's position in the room with her peripheral vision. 20 minutes passed, then 30. Then Dae Jung noticed them. His expression barely changed, but Tabitha caught the momentary freeze, the quick calculation behind his eyes. He excused himself from Lang and crossed the room with the confident stride of someone walking into a trap they didn't see. Brother. Dae Jung's smile was warm, false. I didn't expect to see you here tonight. The doctor said you needed rest. I'm feeling much better. Yeon's tone was pleasant, giving nothing away. Tabitha, this is my brother, Dae Jung. Dae Jung, Tabitha Morris. She's consulting on our employee wellness program. Tabitha extended her hand. Dae Jung's grip was brief, dismissive. He'd already categorized her as irrelevant, pretty decoration on his brother's arm. Nothing more. Perfect. Wellness programs. Dae Jung's attention was already drifting back to Yeon. How progressive. Though I'm surprised you're focusing on that when we have the Vanguard contracts to finalize. The contracts can wait. My employees' health can't. Tension crackled between the brothers, invisible but sharp. Tabitha sipped her water and watched Victoria Lang watching them from across the room. Then Lang started walking toward them, and Tabitha's heart became a war drum in her chest. 3 years. 3 years of waiting for this moment. The woman who'd destroyed her was 10 feet away, then 5, then right in front of her, hand extended, smile perfect. You must be the wellness consultant. Victoria Lang, Senior VP at Vanguard. I'd love to hear more about your work. Tabitha took her hand and smiled back. I'd be delighted to tell you everything. Victoria Lang's handshake was firm, professional, the grip of someone who'd spent decades establishing dominance in rooms full of men. Her eyes were sharp gray, missing nothing the quality of Tabitha's dress, the absence of jewelry except for a simple gold chain, the way she stood with athletic posture that didn't quite match the consultant cover story. Tabitha Morris. Lang tested the name like wine. I don't think we've met before. I know most people in the sports consulting world. I work primarily in Asia. The lie came smoothly, rehearsed. Singapore, Hong Kong, I only recently relocated back to the States. Interesting. Lang's smile didn't reach her eyes. And how did you connect with Mr. Wang? Before Tabitha could answer, Yon smoothly interjected. Mutual contacts in the shipping industry. Tabitha's background in competitive athletics gives her unique insight into performance optimization and injury prevention. Given the physical demands we place on our dock workers, her expertise is invaluable. Competitive athletics? Lang's interest sharpened like a blade being unsheathed. What sport? This was the moment. The trap within the trap. If Tabitha said swimming, Lang might make the connection, but avoiding the question entirely would raise suspicion. Distance running, Tabitha said, meeting Lang's gaze steadily. Nothing glamorous. College level, some regional competitions. I learned early that my real talent was understanding body mechanics, not breaking records. The lie tasted like ash, denying the one thing she'd been extraordinary at. But Lang's posture relaxed fractionally, losing interest. Distance running was common, forgettable, not worth further investigation. Well, it's refreshing to see companies investing in worker welfare. Lang shifted her attention to Yon. Though I'm surprised you're pursuing new initiatives when you have such a significant decision pending. Dae-jung mentioned you needed more time to review our port access proposal. 72 hours, Yon confirmed. I like to be thorough, of course. Lang's smile tightened. Though I should mention our offer has an expiration date. Other markets are showing interest, and our board won't wait indefinitely. Then I suppose we're both working under pressure. The conversation was pleasant on the surface, but Tabitha could feel the undercurrents threat and counter-threat wrapped in corporate courtesy. Dae-jung hovered at his brother's elbow, his jaw tight. He didn't like Yon being here, disrupting whatever timeline he and Lang had arranged. If you'll excuse us, Dae-jung said, placing a proprietary hand on Yon's shoulder. My brother and I need to discuss some family business. I'm sure you ladies can entertain yourselves. It wasn't a suggestion. Yon caught Tabitha's eye for a fraction of a second, a warning or an opportunity. She couldn't tell which, before allowing himself to be steered toward a private corner, which left Tabitha alone with Victoria Lang. Men and their territory battles. Lang sipped her champagne, watching the brothers with amusement. Dae-jung is eager to modernize the family business. Yon is more traditional, resistant to change. Change can be difficult, Tabitha said neutrally. It can also be profitable. Vanguard has helped numerous family operations transition into the modern era. Sometimes the younger generation has better vision than their elders. Lang turned her attention fully to Tabitha. You must understand that dynamic. Working in athletics, the old guard clinging to outdated methods while the sport evolves around them. I've seen it happen. We had a situation a few years ago. Promising young athlete, tremendous potential. But she was being managed by people who didn't understand the business side of sports. Made some poor choices. Trusted the wrong advisors. Lang's tone was conversational, but something in her eyes had sharpened. It ended badly. Such a waste of talent. Tabitha's blood turned to ice. Lang was talking about her. Not by name, not directly, but the message was clear. Even here, even now, Lang was marking her territory, reminding anyone in earshot that Vanguard controlled narratives and destroyed those who challenged them. What happened to her? Tabitha asked, her voice steady despite the rage building in her chest. Oh, the usual. Doping scandal. Lifetime ban. She claimed innocence, of course. They always do. Lang waved a dismissive hand, but the evidence was irrefutable. Her own doctor testified against her. Sometimes people simply can't handle the pressure of elite competition. They make desperate choices and then can't live with the consequences. The room tilted slightly. Lang was rewriting history in real time, turning Tabitha's destruction into a morality tale about weakness and poor judgment, and she was doing it with absolute confidence, because she believed Tabitha O'Berry was safely buried, erased, forgotten. That must have been difficult, Tabitha managed. For everyone involved, not really. We moved on quickly, found new talent to invest in, athletes with better character and judgment. Lang checked her watch, a delicate piece that probably cost more than Tabitha's entire year of dock wages. Sports is a business, Miss Al. Morris. Sentiment has no place in it. The successful understand that. The failures blame everyone but themselves. Across the room, raised voices. Tabitha looked up to see Dae-jung gesturing sharply, his face flushed. Yun stood perfectly still, his expression unreadable. Their private conversation had attracted attention. Other guests were starting to notice. Lang sighed. Family drama. How tedious. If you'll excuse me, I should intervene before they make a scene. She glided away, leaving Tabitha standing alone with a glass of water and 3 years of compressed fury threatening to crack through her carefully maintained composure. Then her phone buzzed. A text from Jan. 2nd floor, 3rd door on the right. Now. Tabitha moved through the crowd like smoke, her athletic training making her movements smooth and unremarkable. She found the stairs, climbed quickly, located the door. It opened into a small library, dark wood and leather chairs, empty except for Jan, who stood by the window with his phone in his hand. "What happened?" she asked. "My brother just made a mistake." Jan turned, and his expression was carved from stone. "He thinks I'm weak because I survived his murder attempt. He just offered to buy me out of the family business entirely. Suggested I retire to recover from my trauma. Let me guess. Victoria Lang was very supportive of this idea. She's already drafted the paperwork. They expected me to sign tonight." He showed her his phone screen a contract, already populated with figures and signatures. Only his line remained blank. "They're moving faster than I anticipated. Because they're scared you'll find out the truth about the brake lines." "Exactly." Jan pocketed the phone. "Which means we don't have 72 hours. We have maybe 48 before they force the issue or try to eliminate me again." Tabitha moved to the window, looked down at the party below. She could see Lang and Dae-jung in conversation, their body language relaxed, confident. They thought they'd already won. "Lang talked about my case," Tabitha said quietly. "Didn't use my name, but she was talking about me. Called it a cautionary tale about athletes who can't handle pressure. She's rewriting history." "She's been rewriting it for 3 years. Tabitha turned from the window. "I want to accelerate the timeline. Whatever you're planning, we do it now. Tomorrow at the latest." "That's aggressive." "That's necessary. They're moving. We need to move faster." She paused. "What's your endgame here, Jan? What happens when we expose them?" He was quiet for a long moment, and in that silence, Tabitha saw something shift in his expression. Not the controlled businessman or the dangerous syndicate leader, but something rawer underneath. "I reclaim my family's business from my brother. Vanguard loses their port access and faces criminal investigation. Victoria Lang answers for every life she's destroyed." He met her eyes. "And you get your name back, your medals, your truth. That simple?" "Nothing about this is simple." He moved closer, and suddenly the library felt smaller, the air heavier. "But I keep my promises, Tabitha. You save my life. I give you back yours. That was always the deal." She wanted to believe him. Wanted to trust that this alliance was more than temporary convenience. But 3 years of betrayal had taught her that promises were just words until they were kept. "Then let's finish this," she said, "before they finish us." Downstairs, the party continued. Champagne flowed, deals were made, and Victoria Lang smiled her perfect smile, never knowing that 2 floors above her, the ghost she'd created was planning her resurrection and her revenge. The evidence arrived at the Federal Bureau of Investigation's New York field office at exactly 8:47 a.m., delivered by courier in 3 sealed boxes, financial records spanning 5 years, recorded phone conversations, emails between Victoria Lang and Dr. Marcus Webb detailing the systematic drugging of athletes for betting manipulation, contracts with shell companies that funneled money through offshore accounts, and testimony sworn, notarized, legally binding from Wang Yon himself, outlining his brother's conspiracy with Vanguard to seize control of the Goryeo syndicate's ports. By noon, federal agents had executed simultaneous raids on Vanguard's offices in 4 states. By 3 p.m., Victoria Lang was in custody, her perfect composure finally cracking as she was led from her corner office in handcuffs. By sunset, the story had broken worldwide. Tabitha watched it unfold from Yon's estate, sitting in the same study where this had all begun 3 weeks ago. The news played on multiple screens, reporters breathless with the scandal's scope, legal analysts predicting decades of litigation, former Vanguard athletes coming forward with their own stories of coercion and manipulation. Her phone hadn't stopped ringing. The Olympic Committee, her former coach, reporters offering 6 figures for exclusive interviews. She'd ignored them all. "They want you to make a statement," Yon said from the doorway. He looked tired, the kind of exhaustion that came from dismantling your own family. Dae-jung had been arrested alongside Lang, facing charges of attempted murder and racketeering. The Goryeo syndicate was in chaos. Its leadership structure collapsed. "I have nothing to say to them yet." Tabitha turned from the screens. "They had 3 years to listen. They can wait a few more days." "Fair enough." He crossed to the bar, poured 2 glasses of water. Still not alcohol. Still just water. Clear and honest. The committee issued a formal apology. They're expediting your reinstatement. Full restoration of records, medals returned, financial compensation for lost earnings. Money won't give me back those 3 years. No, but it's a start. He handed her a glass, their fingers brushing. The touch lasted a fraction longer than necessary. Dr. Webb turned state's witness. He's testifying against Lang in exchange for a reduced sentence. The evidence he's providing will implicate at least a dozen other athletes' cases. Good. Tabitha sipped the water. They all deserve their truth back. They stood in silence, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of amber and rose. The news continued its endless cycle, but the volume was muted now. In the quiet, Tabitha could hear her own thoughts clearly for the first time in weeks. What happens now? She asked. To you, I mean. Your brother's in custody. Your organization is restructuring. The legitimate operations continue under new management. The rest? He shrugged. I'm walking away from it. All of it. She turned to face him fully. You're leaving the syndicate? I'm leaving that life. Turns out nearly drowning gives you perspective. His smile was wry, self-aware. I have enough legal businesses to keep me occupied. Shipping, logistics, trade. No more shadows. No more wondering which family member wants me dead. That's a big change. So is going from Olympic champion to dock worker and back again. He set down his glass. We're both rebuilding, Tabitha. Question is whether we do it separately or don't. She held up a hand. Don't make this into something it's not. We're not partners. We're not friends. We're two people who needed each other to survive. And now that's over. Is it? The question hung between them, weighted with 3 weeks of shared danger. Late-night strategy sessions. Moments of vulnerability neither had shown anyone else. Tabitha thought about the way her pulse jumped when he walked into a room, the way his rare smiles felt like a prize she'd won, the way they'd started finishing each other's sentences during their planning sessions. But she also thought about her mother's ring, heavy against her chest. About the woman she'd been before the scandal and the woman she'd become after. About the fact that she'd spent 3 years learning to stand alone, and depending on someone now, even someone who'd proven trustworthy felt like stepping backward. I don't know, she admitted. I don't know what this is or what it could be. All I know is I need time to figure out who I am now that I'm not fighting for my life. Jan nodded slowly. That's fair. Take your time. I'll be here when you're ready. You sound very certain I'll come back. I'm certain you saved my life for a reason. Maybe that reason isn't finished yet. He moved toward the door, paused. Your medals arrive next week. The committee is holding a private ceremony. Small, dignified. You don't have to go if you don't want to. I'll think about it. After he left, Tabitha stood alone in the study as darkness settled over the estate. Her phone buzzed again, another reporter. Another opportunity to tell her story. She silenced it and pulled out her mother's ring, held it up to the fading light. The inscription was still there, untarnished by river water or time. Tokyo 2021, 400 meters freestyle. T. Obery. But it meant something different now. Not just a record of what she'd accomplished, but proof that she'd survived what came after. That she'd been pushed underwater and had chosen to surface. That she'd saved a stranger's life and, in doing so, had saved her own. 3 months later, Tabitha stood at the edge of an Olympic-sized pool for the first time since the scandal. Not to compete, those days were behind her, and she'd made peace with that. But to coach. The young woman beside her was 17, all raw talent and nervous energy, preparing for the Olympic trials. Remember, Tabitha said, adjusting the girl's goggles. Swimming isn't about being perfect. It's about choosing to keep moving forward even when the water tries to pull you under. The girl nodded and dove in, her form clean and powerful. Tabitha watched her cut through the water with the efficiency of someone who'd been born for this, and felt something unfurl in her chest. Not envy, not regret, just quiet pride that she could give someone else what had been stolen from her, the chance to chase greatness without fear. Her phone buzzed. A text from Jan. Coffee tomorrow? No agenda. Just 2 people who refuse to drown. Tabitha smiled and typed back. Tomorrow. But I'm buying. We're even now. His response came immediately. We were never even, and that's okay. She pocketed her phone and turned back to the pool, where her student was executing a perfect flip turn, powering through the water like it was made of light instead of resistance. Sometimes you have to drown before you learn how to breathe again. Sometimes the people you save end up saving you right back. And sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction, it's becoming so fully yourself that the people who tried to erase you can never touch you again. The depth of your fall is only surpassed by the height of your rise, but you have to choose to surface. If this story reminded you that your past doesn't define your future, that strength is forged in the deepest waters, and that sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to stay broken, then share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment telling me which moment hit you hardest. And subscribe, because every story we tell here is about people who refuse to let the world write their ending. Tabitha's resurrection is complete, but there are more stories waiting. More ghosts ready to become warriors. And honey, you won't want to miss what comes next.